Alrighty, welcome back to BTC Treasury Company Analysis, Episode 2. If you haven't seen the first one, go back. I encourage you to go back and watch that. As we walk through the spreadsheet that you see on the screen right now. And if you did watch the first one, this is going to be an evolving process. As we go along, I'm going to continue to update and hopefully upgrade and just make this more and more useful. So I wanted to kind of cover what's new now. So now I've got Google Finance pulling in the share price in real time in column F. So I don't have to go in and laboriously type in the updated price every time I wanted to view this, because the price impacts other columns as well, right? So everything has an impact on other data. I've also added a column here in column H. You'll see this is the amount of Bitcoin that each of these companies held as of January 1st. Okay. And so you can see, for example, Strategy had 446,400 Bitcoin as of January 1st. Column I is the amount of Bitcoin held presently. So today they hold 601,550. Column J then represents, as you can see, the year-to-date growth. So they've gone from 446 to 601, representing a 35% growth. Okay, so what stands out in this column? Anything that's in green you can see has made huge growth this year. You have MetaPlanet, and this is why the MetaPlanet community is growing so fast, and why you've seen so much hype there, and why Dylan and team are just relentlessly executing on their BTC strategy, because they went from 1,762 to now 16,532 Bitcoin held on balance sheet as of today, I believe. So that's pretty amazing. Who else stands out? Kango, as I mentioned last time, the Chinese company, and just because I have it marked in red because of the jurisdiction they're in doesn't mean I don't like the company, right? It's just something to be aware of. It's another data point as we're going through and assessing what could go wrong, what could go right, unique advantages. We have to take that into account. So who else? The blockchain group. Boy, we've heard a lot about these guys. They basically are just like MetaPlanet is to Japan. These guys are doing that for France. And it's cool to see what they're doing. As they've gone from 40 Bitcoin, I believe, at the beginning of the year to now 1,910. And keep in mind, anybody that is at 1,000 or more in Bitcoin qualifies to be added to the ETF OWNB. That's OWNB. That is basically, for those of you that don't want to come in and you say, I don't have time to come in and invest in all these and see who's got the mNAVs, the highest, the lowest, who's got the BTC gain, the yield. That's too much. Who's got the social media following today, the soup du jour. I just want to buy the basket, because I believe that all of the BTC Treasury companies are going to go up. Well, then I would recommend OWNB if that's you, because this is just an easy way to get all the treasury companies that are buying Bitcoin that have at least 1,000 Bitcoin on their balance sheet, and you can just buy it with one easy fund, right? So OWNB is something, if you don't have time to dig into all these things. And I like owning just a little OWNB just to compare, right? To see, well, today it was up 0.16%, right? So pretty flat, but to compare to how my portfolio is doing if I'm holding separate ones. And a lot of these companies I do own. And you'll see my recommendation here. Again, not financial advice, just having fun with all the data that's out there. It's coming at us fast and furious. It's like drinking from a fire hose. I know. Every day it seems like there's a company being added. Every day there's a metric being added. Speaking of, we'll get to that in a second with the shout out to Jesse Myers and P-Biddy. That's the new metric that he released last night. In fact, why don't we mention that right now? Let us see there. So, where are you at? All right. So last night, Jesse introduced this, and then Josh had fun with it. We've been calling it PBID in the math lab. It's kind of like a code that says, I'm a quant, and you know how girls love quants. Josh on fire as usual. But Jesse is got actually a pretty interesting thread where he's comparing this PBID to basically in the TradFi world what the PE ratio is. So this is what the PE ratio will, instead of using PE ratio, I've actually removed that column because that's really a TradFi metric. And we had, negative numbers in there for strategy just based on the accounting and all that. But a better way to measure this for a Bitcoin treasury company, and again, these are all Bitcoin treasury companies, so this is apples to apples. So going forward, we're gonna try this formula, and I've built this in, and hopefully this is a good spot-on metric here. But what he's basically taking is the years, that's the Y, years to shareholder return on Bitcoin held. And how many years is that, right? So that metric is going to say how long is it going to take to get to that, right? So it's basically taking the log function of the mNAV divided by N minus log, and then 1 plus BYD. And your BYD is Bitcoin yield delivered over the most recent period. I'm guessing from what he's doing here that he's using the half of the year so far, so I'm using 2 as my number there to try to get to this, and correct me if I'm wrong. And again, I'm going to continue to update this spreadsheet and try to make this more and more useful as we go. As you can see, we've added a lot just in the last few days here. Okay, let's jump back though to column K. Column K is the daily acquisition rate. This is how many Bitcoin on average. Now, we know some days people don't buy, right? Like just 2 weeks ago, Sailor on a Sunday morning put out, hey, some weeks it's just good to hodl, right? But for the most part, they're buying. And if you were to just take the number of days and divide it by the number of Bitcoin that they've added so far, well, this is what we get in this column. So again, green is good. We see strategy. If we looked at all the other companies and we've already given props and shout outs to some of these other companies, right, that are doing a really good job running the strategy playbook. But let's not forget, if we take all of these other companies and we average how much they're adding in Bitcoin per day, it comes to how much? Less than 575. So like 5/8 of what strategy is adding to their treasury alone. So again, and I think this is a good visual. I put this out on Twitter recently in the MSTR chat, and a lot of people like this visual, right? Because it just shows you, don't forget that strategies makes up 73% of the overall holdings right now. I mean, the next closest is Mara at 50,000, so it's just a sliver of the pie. And some of these are too small, you don't even have room to put them in there. So again, strategy's number one by a long shot. I've also got, and hopefully this continues to update correctly, I've got the Bitcoin price coming in now automatically, so I don't have to continue to type that in. And yeah, as of right now, I think that's accurate. Let's see. Yeah, Bitcoin's on Coinbase at 119.7, on Binance at 119.7 as well. Okay. Just as a reminder, column M, I'm not going to spend a lot of time. If you haven't seen the first episode, go back and watch it. This is where I break down, and by the way, all the explanations are on the explanations tab. But this is basically to account for unique situations where you don't actually get the one-to-one. The assumption is you're going to get one-to-one on all these, except for so far what we've seen with the SPACs, the special acquisition companies. So we have ProCap, CCCM, and we have XXI, which is still listed under ticker CEP. When that deal closes, we know it's going to be less than 3% that the shareholders actually get when they become 21 instead of CEP. So I'm factoring that in right now to the mNAV. Otherwise, we get an mNAV blown way out of proportion, and it really does us a disservice when we're trying to compare these companies to each other. Okay. So having said that, here is the most recent mNAVs for all these companies. And again, you see some that really stand out in red, like a Tesla, because they haven't added, they haven't bought this year. You know, you can see Bitcoin held today is the same that they, actually that's the other way around. Hopefully that doesn't screw up there we go. Okay, so what that does is that throws an error off into the next column here for Tesla. That is the days to cover. So this is another metric that you've seen probably talked about on Twitter as well. And this is basically, here, I'll read what we have here in column O. This evaluates how long it would take, okay, to accumulate enough Bitcoin at the current stacking pace that would justify the premium you're paying on that underlying stock. Okay, so in order to justify, because the larger the company is, right, the more Bitcoin they already have, so Strategy being so large and with an mNAV of almost 2, that takes like 1,000 days to reach that to justify it. Okay, so in this category, right, this data point, we'd want to see a lower number to see who is going to take less days to then validate that premium that you're paying on the stock. So if we looked at Metaplanet, for instance, it's a 663. If we looked at Fold, 164, right? So some of these have really low days to cover mNAV. Like, again, similar, probably the most undervalued. Shout out to Joe Burnett and team of what they're doing. They added again today, by the way. So yeah, good job, Semler. They have now passed and called out Ryan Cohen today in GameStop. They've now passed GameStop. So when we woke up this morning, they were below GameStop. And then first thing this morning, Joe put out the tweet that they had added a couple hundred Bitcoin. And that might not sound like a lot, but that actually is significant because it moved them up. And I've got this sorted from most Bitcoin to least held on the balance sheet. So now you've got Semler that just leapfrogged GameStop, which is awesome. The next category over here in column P is the yield to year to date. So this is BTC yield that you hear Strategy talk about all the time in their metrics. And then we briefly mentioned earlier Jesse Myers and the P-bid. So this is our, I think, PE ratio in the traditional world. Okay, so you can see that Strategy comes in with a 1.5, which is in line with their mNAV. Okay, the highest on here would be someone like a Block, because Block, again, this is what I mentioned earlier, Tesla. So yeah, so Block is like Tesla, where they haven't added really this year. Okay, so that's going to make their number not look appealing there, right? And that's good. This is where a metric shows what have you done for me lately, and for Block, Square, XYZ, whatever they're going by, that's a negative spot there, right? And so overall, you see, I have them as a sell because I don't see them doing anything exciting at the moment as far as being a BTC Treasury company. Now, they have the advantage because they put a lot of Bitcoin on their balance sheet prior to this year, but it remains to be seen what they're going to do. You know, GameStop came out and made one large buy, but we haven't seen anything since. So, but again, their metric looks okay at 2.1, so we'll see what they do. Columns R and S are leveraged. This is, again, just letting you know, a lot of people think that these companies are over leveraged and they're going to fail. Well, that's not true. This is the leverage percentage each one is at. And then, so Strategy's only at a 12%. It's very low. Then in column S, this is if Bitcoin were to fall all the way to $60,000 overnight, well, they'd still only be leveraged at 19%. So a lot of people have the misconception that if the Bitcoin price went down like that to, let's say, 60,000, that all of a sudden strategy would be underwater. Michael Saylor would have to sell all his Bitcoin. It's game over. That is not the case at all. I believe, and you can check with True North and Jeff Walton and team. They think Bitcoin has to go to like $18,000 or $19,000 and be there for a significant amount of time before we have any kind of concerns about them having to sell or anything like that. So again, 19%. If your neighbor had a mortgage and he owed 19% left on it, that means they had 81% equity in the house. You wouldn't say he's underwater and upside down. You'd say he's doing really well, or she. IV is just implied volatility. Okay, next in U, I've got a new column that I added. This is something that I hadn't thought about, and it gets brought up as far as how strategy has different levers available to them. So I think this is good that we stop here and spend a minute on the levers available, okay? And so green is good, right? Red is bad. The number of levers available to a company, the way I'm doing this is, if we come over to the explanations here, this is the number of ways a company can add Bitcoin to its balance sheet. So one would be cash from operations. So if you have a good underlying business, that's a great way to add. And that's actually, quite honestly, where strategy struggles, right? But on these other things, you'll see. Okay, so we count that as one. We count another lever. If you're a Bitcoin mining company, hey, you're getting Bitcoin built right in. That's a lever built in, and it's up to you whether you want to hold that or sell that. We mentioned that in the first video. That's why iron is not on here, and CleanSpark is, because they are adding on to their Bitcoin balance sheet. I've got one for warrants, which is what Metaplanet's been doing. One, if they're hitting the ATM common stock, there's so much buzz around, they're hitting the ATM again, right? So again, that's only one lever though. And then for preferred stocks, which is like your strategy, I'm doing 1 plus N. So strategy has how many? They have 3 preferreds, right? They've got Strike, they've got Strife, and they've got Stride. And if you're not familiar with those, check out True North as they break down those in great detail. But there's Stride, STRD, Strife, STRF, that pays a 10% at par, and Strike pays an 8% perpetual quarterly dividend with a perpetual call option on it. So like this is, and they just moved up in the capital stack. So like Strike is an awesome product. And as you can see, that's up today. So I picked up some of that the last couple of days here when we had that drop, and I'm assuming that drop was probably Saylor and team hitting the Strike ATM to buy Bitcoin here, which again, it's a self-healing product. So as they do that, that's going to make the yield go up, and then you're going to have people buying in like myself. And so the market still hasn't figured out how valuable this is, because this price is probably going to go way up because you're still getting a 6.5% yield here, which is higher than the risk-free rate, right? So, and it's over collateralized compared to a treasury as well. So again, those are 3 more levers. So I've got 4 levers there for strategy. I've got 3 for Mara. Again, they're a Bitcoin miner, right? They've opened up their ATM, and then also have cash flow. So if a company only has one, I've got them in red, right? So that's something to be aware of. And this is why it's hard for some of these companies to get off the ground. Like, again, Semler being like my favorite one. It's only and I own quite a few shares in full disclosure of Semler and love what they're doing. But they're at a disadvantage until they can really get that ramped up. They did one convertible bond, which we all know brings down the price of the stock. Ask GameStop what happened. Ask Strategy in the early days when they did 5 of those. And so I don't see companies doing the convertibles, so I'm not really going to pay too much mind to that. I mean, in fact, I didn't even include it in here. So what we're looking at is do they get to the preferreds? Because that preferred stock is going to perform so well, and it's so accretive once that's rolling. So I can't wait to see, again, what Joe and the team at Semler do, because once that gets going and we can increase the levers here, Semler's going to their stock is going to take off. Right now, their stock is held down because they have to hit the ATM to buy. I still have it as a buy. I still think it's woefully underpriced with an mNAV of 1.2, okay? But this number of levers that they have available to them right now needs to grow in scale. Again, my recommendations are still the same. Nothing's changed on the columns out here with sensitivity to Bitcoin price, the options market, the chances that they're going to dilute your shares, the liquidity risk, the regulatory risk, the operational risk, and the overall risk that each of these companies has. I have made a couple updates based on news and events and announcements and things like that. But again, I think probably you're overall interested in seeing what the recommendation is. Again, not financial advice, but this is what I am personally doing. I am adding where I say buy, I am holding where I have holds, and I'm looking to sell where I've got sell. Like I've got a couple open covered calls on Riot, so once those are expired or I buy those to close those, I'll be looking to possibly sell there. But again, this is where we're at. This is what I've got. BTC price year-to-date change is up 22%, so it's right on pace to hit its 40% CAGR that it's been doing. We've had a compound annual growth rate. I like the work of the power trend guys. I don't like the word power law because people get freaked out by power law and they say, oh no. And I know all the models are broken, some are useful, I get it. And if the power trend happens to break this year, I too believe that it will break to the upside. But for now, if I wanted to go pick a date in the future and kind of see where there's a line that it goes by, and there is math behind that, with the 15 years of data that makes it a solid trend line, I think it's great. And if we're going to grow the next 20 years at a 40% compound annual growth rate, well, we're right on pace. And this lines up pretty close to where the power trend would have us today as well. So anyway, a lot of great information out there. And some of it is, like I said, comes in every day. So like the PE, which is the P to the BYD, is a brand new metric that we just heard about last night, and we'll see if these stick. For now, I'm going to try it. I've got them built in. The yield, the days to cover, the mNAV, the daily Bitcoin acquisition rate, that is, I kind of widened those columns because they mean a lot, right? And I wanted to spend some time on that today. So hopefully with the updates to this, we've got some even better data as we just hone in on everything that's available to us. It's a lot. Like there's great channels that are covering each of these companies individually, and there's people that talk about the overall. Like Tim Kosman does an outstanding job of actually sitting down one-on-one and talking with the real players that are involved in this space. So there's a lot of signal and alpha there. I'm a data-driven guy, though. I love seeing all of this. So I'm just taking all the work that's being done by everybody, and I'm trying to put it together, kind of how Larry Lepard did with his book, The Big Print. Like, there's a lot of good content written on Bitcoin, but he took it in a way that, just kind of made it simple for the masses. So hopefully this is simple enough to digest for no matter who you are. And then hopefully it's got enough data points in it that if you're an expert in all this, there's enough in there to see and how they all work together. Again, I really like the idea that I had on the levers available to put in there. That's something we have to account for. And when that changes, we'll talk about that. So I know as we go on with this, we're gonna have new categories. I might remove something that's not working and add something that is. It's gonna be fluid, but thanks for coming along on the ride. Please like and subscribe and share this with others if it's been a benefit to you. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.